Welcome to another episode of this Chris Rod Max Show. This is a show where we talk about weekly news on AI, which is the most exciting technology at the moment. So with me, Max, we have
I'm Rod. Great to be here.
And Chris, really happy to be talking today.
awesome. I guess with that, we'll just quickly kick off. There are a lot of news coming off last week. Since we last recorded this episode. I guess first thing that we want to talk a little bit about, it's around prompt engineering. So we know that when OpenAI started, it's all about text to text. You write something, you define your role, and then you define what you want specifically. But then because of the multimodal releases, as we have seen, with Copilot, with I would say OpenAI, we love to see how this prompt engineering idea will move on. So that's why we have a question around the longevity of prompt engineering. I think with that, I'll probably start off with Rod. From a product perspective, how do you think about prompt engineering as, I guess, a profession, a tool going forward? I think that the prompt comes from, I guess, different modal now. So I'd love to get a little bit of your perspective on the longevity of prompt engineering.
Yes, it has been interesting to see how we keep moving in, let's say, like two speeds. One is the tech world, and the other one is everyone else in the outside world, where until, let's say, just a few months ago, you really need to understand a lot how to craft a good prompt. It was not enough to just say, ChatGPT, please generate X for Y. But rather instead, you need to assign a role. You need to tell you will be a top writer expert in handcrafting blog posts. And then you also need to specify your audience will be, let's say, a listener of the Chris Rodmack show who like these topics and so on. So you need to be aware of what is necessary to craft something that is very explicit, very detailed, pretty much like a project or statement of work that you will give to the LLM, to in this case, so ChatGPT, in order to get the result. However, what we have been seeing is that, so on one side, the models get better, so they can understand even more, even vaguer prompts, even requests that are not that well crafted. But also, just a few weeks ago, Anthropic, which is the company behind Claude AI, released a tool that lets you generate prompts. So how it works is, if it has an input similar to any type of LM, any type of chatbot, you put there what you want. So let's say I want this blog post for the listeners of the show. And what it does is it generates a much more detailed version of that with steps, with many tips and tricks that until recently, they were only pretty much reserved to those who were really immersed into this world of prompt engineering. So this means that now you can generate really good prompts without knowing too much about prompting. But at the same time, what happens in the regular world, the normal world, is that people still don't know that this tool exists, don't know that there is prompt engineering even. They keep just saying, so hi, ChatGPT, I would like to do X and Y.
I want to add on top of that, I suppose everyone has tried DALI or Midjourney, and I think that's really where prompt engineering has its greatest potential, I suppose, to really generate images. And most often it's a trial and error process where you put in something and then you just pray and hope that the image that ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs generate will look somewhat like what you have in mind. And so I think that's a use case where prompt engineering obviously has its greatest impact. But at the same time, I think to me, prompt engineering is it's a like a in chess you would probably say like an intermediate step. It's basically bridging a certain technology gap, if you want. What do I mean by that? Well, it is kind of like the early days of search, perhaps, where you had to write it in a certain way, like you would use two keywords and then you would search for it. And nowadays, when you go on Google search, you just type in like, how do you make lasagna or whatever, and you would actually get the right results. So over time, these kind of input and interaction formats become more human. And I think this is also the case, for example, with coding, right? So before you had to like actually sit in front of an editor and you would have to like code HTML and JavaScript and so forth by hand. And then you had platforms to help you automate some of that work process. And then obviously you also have the um, you see what you get, or you what is it called, what you see is what you get, editors, where basically you don't have to have any code anymore. You just like say what you want, and then it appears. And I think this is also something where when we talk about the longevity of prompt engineering, I wonder if we're actually moving towards that, especially now that we have these multimodal ways of interacting with AI.
And a couple of things here. So just in November of last year, Bloomberg had a story titled, "A year after ChatGPT, everybody still wants prompt engineers." And then they were saying that a prompt engineer can earn up to $300,000 per year. So, and it's a very coveted position. But just 2 days ago, JP Morgan, the bank, had a statement saying that every employee of the bank will get a prompt engineering training in order to be able to work with AI. So we see how also this supply and demand situation in the market is trying to find an equilibrium. So where just a few months ago, super hot profession in demand, you can earn up to $300,000. And then just now it's supposed that everyone in a white collar profession, in this case JP Morgan, will be getting training such that they can use LLMs properly with prompt engineering.
I find that super interesting. So how I think about prompt engineering is how I think about having a conversation with a human. Think of it like a little bit like psychology, right? So some people react differently to certain type of questions, the way you structure them. That's why, I guess in consulting, if it's important, you repeat the things 3 times or something like that. So there are age-old stuff that humans react better to. I was recently reading the advertising book by David Ogilvy. A lot of it makes no sense now because we don't do a lot of tele ad, or people don't consume ads on tele. But a lot of those, I guess, basic human behaviors are still there, right? People love, I guess, visuals, certain typing, certain type of copywriting reacts better. What I think about this is, when as AI become more human, your prompt engineering is almost like a psychology of understanding AI, right? What is the best way to get the right information from the AI models that you have trained? And those models, by the way, are trained on the data that we have produced. Hence why I guess the search becomes interesting. I think that's how I think about it at the moment. And then just recently, as recent as yesterday, I was using Copilot to develop to pull together some questions for a conversation I'm about to have. And exactly to your point, right? My prompt engineering knowledge is as limited to what role am I playing, what is it that I want to get to. But in the future, I believe everyone should be trained on prompt engineering, especially if you're using those Copilot like tools a lot more often.
I want just to underscore. I want to just underscore so what Chris is saying, that in the early days of search engines, we really need to be very aware of how to prepare a good search query. We'll need to know all these tokens, all these ways that you can put quotes, you can leave the quotes, etc., etc. And now the majority not only knows how to work with search engines, but also search engines themselves. They can be much more responsive even to very vague queries. And maybe we might see the same thing with the job market, where even today, if you go to LinkedIn, you see that there are more than 700 jobs where prompt engineering is considered a requirement or a skill. Potentially 6 months from now, this number will become much smaller, will completely disappear, because everyone will be getting at their company some sort of training. And as a result, prompt engineering will become a skill that any white collar knows how to handle.
The images that pop up in my mind is almost like you speak like Yoda in a very like simplistic way, or you speak like a baby, and then you sort of like over time evolve to speak like a natural human. And I think given the speed of technology advancement on AI, I believe this is probably earlier than later. And so I think the question in the room is really like, is it worth spending time on learning prompt engineering or becoming more precise on search queries? Because at the end of the day, what is prompt engineering? It's a certain way to phrase things that the machine will understand. But as the machine gets better, I believe it's not necessarily anymore to speak in a very mechanical or machine-like way, but just be very natural.
I would say it depends. It depends also what the person wants to do and so on, how especially wants to become in working with AI software. Um, there's also like so many tricks, and also like the LLMs themselves are evolving. And not only that, but also what happens is that you can copy paste the same prompt into two different LLMs. So let's say like one is goes to ChatGPT and the other one goes to Claude AI, and the results that you get for the same prompt will be completely different. So even within the same family of models or different vendors, you need to understand what works best for the respective model and know these tips and tricks. The question will be if at some point we'll have, let's say, like a filter where we'll have first some sort of LM generator similar to this one from Anthropic that is already available, where you prepare like the prompt, you say what you want, and then this can craft it for any type of LM that you're working with. Llama 3, OpenAI ChatGPT, OpenAI GPT-4o, etc.
Great. I think the prompt engineering, I guess we probably will know what will happen in the next few months, given that things are moving so quickly. The other thing that I guess we touch upon is on search. So obviously, when the internet started, obviously search was a big thing. Everyone was trying to figure out what to search, all the different information that we got to. And I think Chris sent an article around search engine used to be Grand Central Terminal, where everyone goes to and then go out to receive those information. I guess with the advent of AI and use cases that are coming out of AI, which is traditional people like me search information. How do you guys think? I would say search will evolve going forward. I guess what I'd love to hear, given that both of you have been working in the tech scene and understanding where things are moving, I'd love to get a little bit on your thoughts around this. I think I'll start off with Chris around the search idea. Used to be Grand Central Terminal, but then obviously it will change eventually. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's a very exciting topic. And the reason is it's got so many second and third order consequences, right? Like Google has been dominating the search market. I think 90% of search is actually happening on Google. And Google's revenue, majority of it, the core business is advertising on the search. I mean, SEO, SEM, making up about 77-80% of Google's revenue. So by and large, Google has been the monopoly on search, at least in the Western world. And obviously now we see this huge disruption. And I mean, that's also the reason why social media, Meta, Google, and other players are obviously also investing heavily into AI to defend their core business, essentially, that's getting disrupted. And I don't think we've seen such an era before when it comes to search. And I think we use Google almost like as a verb, and it's so integrated in our daily life. And now actually search is becoming more fragmented, and we have spoken about this in other episodes before. But now if you want to find a product, you might actually pop to Amazon and you directly search something. Or if you think about knowledge, you may have gone to Wikipedia directly, or now you would actually use ChatGPT or Claude or one of the AI players. So I think it's very interesting to think about not only how do we search in the future, but also what is the implication for online marketing and entire industries that are built on the fact that you can search on YouTube, on Google search, etc. What do you guys think about it?
What I see is that for anyone who uses a search engine these days without an ad blocker, let's say the majority of the population, search has become a very poor product, a very poor experience, where let us say that you just want to find out more about the iPhone, when it was released or how it started and so on. Just type iPhone on Google and the Wikipedia page or any informational page will come like way down. You have to scroll down a lot. So the first will be your first links to stores. It will be some sort of like promotional links, paid links, etc. So to get the information that you want, you have to scroll a lot. Then you have all the pages that try to rank using SEO techniques, so using search engine optimization. And then this means that the content they provide is not that good. but then somehow they get good results, good positioning. So as a user, it's quite cumbersome. If you just want to know when was the iPhone released, it's not something that you get the answer immediately, and you have to do quite some legwork. On the other hand, what is also happening is that also Google is adding this AI functionality. So when you type any type of question, such as when was the iPhone released, they already display the result. They will say it was released in 2006. The other aspect on this is that we have to think, this means that now Google or also other players, for example, Perplexity AI, which is an AI first search engine, is let's say like ChatGPT, but with search functionality that provides sources, become the arbiters of truth, so to say, where they decide why they show to you, why they don't show to you. And this means that topics such as bias, topics such as positions in politics and so on, become focus and center because they now decide why you should be seen and what not. And many people will not like that. Many people want the raw experience of just finding the results, the truth on their own.
Yeah, that's super interesting in the sense that because of the personalized search, I would say effect with AI, so you're no longer served with, I don't know, the Google with multiple O's at the back where you can click all the way to figure out what is it that you want to look for and really search deep in the market. But with, let's say, ChatGPT, if you were to do search on ChatGPT, you just type something, they surface, an nth amount of information for you. That kind of just limits the amount of things that you can search for in a way, or you just have to keep typing the same prompt, hoping for a slightly different result. I guess the hidden cost there would be, one of the things that they talk about, it's around the advertising model itself will probably change quite drastically. And I think that will upend a lot of the large tech companies as we know it, because a lot of them are still relying on large advertising dollars from those products. I would say, from product companies. I think that to me is quite interesting because you potentially see a shift away from, something that we have been talking about, which is advertising is not entirely good for you if it's selling you things that you don't need. So I guess it will be quite interesting to see how will, I guess, humans react to that as a whole. And when it comes to like searching with words as well, like the association, the way we work is we can read, let's say, a sentence without completing the entire sentence. You pick out the keywords, you can roughly know what does it mean. I guess the way we think about this will be also slightly different going forward, because when we search in those keywords. When we think in those keywords. So will AI then help us to get into those keywords in order to find the right thing that we want? But I guess I would interesting to hear both your thoughts around the consequences of search upending the advertising model. But Chris, Rod,
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, you're basically just talking about prompt engineering here again, no? I mean, keyword search, AI trying to help. But also to your point, Rod, on personalized search and whether or not we want it in raw format, I think is how you called it. I actually believe that's because you ask current users, but just imagine kids and like the younger generations, they will grow up with AI, and that's quite a thought. I think it's like, wow, like they've never had to like, I mean, first of all, not a landline in general, but like, what is it going to be like to grow up with AI? And perhaps then behaviors will shift. And actually, this whole discussion around search really reminds me of my time in China. And obviously, China works very differently in terms of internet ecosystem. And search, like, I mean, everyone talks about Baidu being the equivalent of Google search. But actually, to be honest, not a lot of people go on Baidu as their starting point for a search. What they do is normally to go on WeChat or one of the Alibaba platforms to search for product. And in WeChat, you can also search for articles. You can like put a keyword in and you get articles, you get chat conversation or history, you get almost like a Baidu Wikipedia information page. You get, videos on a certain keyword. So multi-formatted on WeChat in the ecosystem. And I think what we've seen in China, I think it was maybe in 2017 or 18, there was this rise of so-called mini programs, which existed within an app, like WeChat, for example. So, for example, Starbucks would decide to build a mini app where they actually do have a mini program. And then if you were to search Starbucks in WeChat, the mini program would pop up, and then you would be able to do a light version of features on that Starbucks mini program, meaning you could order a cappuccino or frappuccino, and also pay in it. And I wonder, not saying that the world will be going that direction, but I think this is a very interesting way to think about, okay, what is one potential path, how search will evolve. So in this case, it's actually distributed across different players with different use cases. And advertising is, I mean, not really existent on WeChat per se, but then on the mini programs, obviously you have advertising.
Max's comment made me think a lot about how the business model of the internet is being completely upended slowly, because we're not there yet, but definitely will happen with the rise of these AI first search engines such as Perplexity AI. So where traditionally what will happen is that an organization such as Google or Facebook, they will pay publishers, the New York Times, so Wall Street Journal and so on, in order to include their news as part of their results, as part of their snippets. And last decade, there were like massive deals, and so where it will be hundreds of millions will be paid. These days, these deals are being cancelled, and at best, for example, there was a few weeks release that so there was a deal between News Corp, the publisher behind the Wall Street Journal, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Google. So where it will be receiving something like $5 to $6 million per year for this type of news advertisement deals. And if you think about it, so for an institution such as the Wall Street Journal, 5 million is really nothing. So we see how the value of news is being completely diminished. And on top of that is the topic of how will the whole internet be now capable of monetize their content. It is classic of, okay, I will start having some advertisement and so on my platform for my articles, for my videos, and that's how I make money. But if now what happens is that you ask to a chatbot, a search engine, and so on, how can I best buy an iPhone? And you immediately get a result, and you get a link to the Amazon so page and so on. And this completely skips the route of first finding someone who wrote an article about it, then clicking on the article, reading the article, going to the affiliate link, maybe clicking on advertisement and so on. It completely removes a layer in the internet business where potentially hundreds of thousands are living from.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? We're talking about advertising here, and if you think about advertising, is the idea of advertising. I guess I trust David Ogilvy on this. He's I guess the god of advertising. To advertising's goal is to sell, and the whole idea of surfacing the right information so that eventually you and I or whoever is on it will transact on it. And with the WeChat mini programs, sometimes you can just immediately click on the link and immediately go into some sort of execution mode, with skipping the whole idea of it's troublesome to go search for something, go buy something, etc. So I think it's yet to be seen how this will entirely unfold, right? I don't have a very good idea from an AI perspective, but I think Chris's point around how search was embedded within certain application feels like that. If there are mini programs within Open API, now that you have multimodal talking to it, can I just tell Open API I'm going to call Chris Rod in the next 20 minutes, spin up Zoom, right? So then something might come out from that perspective. So I think applications like this, the cross-referencing, helping me to do the work kind of thing will all come into play. I guess with that, I'd like to shift gears a little bit. We talk a little bit about China. And one of the things that we realized this week in China is, there's a boom of AI in a box. So the deployment of cloud, or deployment of AI on cloud or on-prem has always been, the contentious point for the past 10 years or 20 years, or anything on cloud or on-prem. AI is no different. So from AI's perspective, obviously, I think we found an article on FT where a China AI group is selling AI in a box product for companies to run models on premise. And I find that, I guess, particularly interesting, especially coming from a I would say enterprise background, understanding why there's a need for some sort of on-prem, there's a need for some sort of cloud for performance. Hence, the shift towards AI in the box, I feel like it's almost like inevitable, but it's interesting to see it's coming out of China. So I'd love to get, I guess, both your thoughts on this. What do you guys think around AI in the box solutions, especially the big tech China is pushing for this, whereas here in this part of the world, everyone is really embracing cloud, right? For example, Microsoft, like the entire cloud is run on Microsoft Copilot. It's like, okay. So let's get a little bit of your thoughts. Maybe I'll start with you, Rod, from a product perspective, and then Chris could give us a little bit about from a market perspective. How do you think about that? Over to you, Rod.
It's as you're saying that so here in Western countries, it's all about embracing cloud. It's all about running our AI in Azure from Microsoft in AWS. And this on one side is because they really have great marketing. So you just feel, okay, this is way to do it. But also it's because it is just very simple. So like for a developer to implement anything using this versus, for example, just having your own GPUs, building the infrastructure and so on, there are not that many sources, companies and so on that let you really do this self-hosted. And the cloud is so easy. Plus on top, most companies, they tend to favor having a single bill, and they said, okay, I am already paying for my hosting of my website on AWS. Then now let's pay for the AI services from AWS. It makes things much simpler. And as a result, we have this situation where everyone is using the cloud. But that doesn't need to be, because we see how companies, vendors are getting much better and much more efficient, both in terms of performance as well as cost in their hardware. So just this week, there was a big announcement from Qualcomm together with Microsoft, where they're releasing so-called AI chips that are being implemented in laptops, and they let you run common workflows for, let's say, consumers that will require calling a API, calling the cloud, and using OpenAI or using ChatGPT. So now, for example, if you want to, let's say, edit a photo and remove someone from the photo, you can do this completely locally with one of these AI chips from Qualcomm instead of having to work with OpenAI or any other vendor.
Yeah, and I mean, coming back to China here, I think the local market is already a 2 billion market, and I think by 27 it's estimated that it will have reached $60 billion, which is obviously quite crazy, like a 30x increase. And this essentially just shows you the potential of just the single domestic market here, right? We're only talking about China as a domestic market, not Huawei or any of these players selling globally. And I guess the question is like, why is there so much potential, and where does this potential come from? And obviously, I think in general, China had a bit of struggle to figure out, okay, what do they do with AI, given some of the protectionism and some of the filtering, and obviously as AI, you would need a lot of data, you would need Wikipedia-like data to really come up with good results from LLM models. So I think AI in a box and on-premise obviously reduces the reliance on other players. And I think in general, data and data theft is a topic in China. So by reducing it, you obviously keep your advantage over your competitors. And I think that could be one of the major drivers for why there's such huge potential. Think of education, think of construction, think of all the different industries thinking about how to adopt AI. And I think that way could be one way for them to, build up AI capabilities while also keeping their data protected.
In the tech world, we have a constant discussion on social media. So where are we headed as a market, as a society? Are we going back to the old era of mainframes? So where you think how it was computing in the 50s, in the 60s, the 70s, there will be these massive mainframes that will take whole basements. Companies will have a whole basement so full with this, and then you will go downstairs to the basement. You'll say, oh, I want to compute this. You'll get to someone, and then this will be centrally processed, and you'll get the results printed out. And over time, we moved into desktops. We moved to the situation where everyone will have their own device, mobile, desktop, etc. And then you will not need to make use of a central resource. But now with AI, is potentially occurring. So what we had decades ago, we're going back to a situation where we're calling central services and depending on them. But the counterexample is that as we're seeing with all these vendors, in this case Huawei with their AI in a box, but also like Qualcomm and so on, we have also available the possibility to like self-host, to have it in our own home devices, consumer devices, and enterprise ones. So it's a question, are we going back to the mainframe era, or do we will get better and better devices and everything will happen locally?
I think that's an interesting question. What I have in my mind is basically if it's entirely dependent on the current zeitgeist. At the moment, nationalistic, I would say, thinking is very much on the agenda for every single large country, small countries around the world. Governments are using more technology, but governments are not necessarily the best, when it comes to utilizing cloud, both from the US, UK, China, you name it, everywhere. So I think this AI in the box would be super helpful for government agencies that need to deploy any sort of AI, especially to Chris's point, where data is extremely sensitive. Because if I have access to, I don't know, healthcare data records of everyone in the UK, I can pretty much figure out how to, sell things that are, very bad to the UK, for example, things like that. I think I can see that those happening. So selling, AI in a box solutions almost felt like, you play into the current narrative around nationalism, around, I guess, specifically national security, if you will. So I guess that's something that I guess we've been thinking about. I think at the topic of security, we obviously we obviously saw the departure of a few prominent figures in OpenAI. Those prominent figures are also prominent figures that work on the topic of AI security. And at the same time, we also saw a couple of folks online believe that, we are blowing out proportion around the need for AI security. I think there's no right or wrong answer here. Because even when it comes to politics, one could be Democratic or Republican, but certain views are right, and also it entirely context dependent, depending on which country you're in, what kind of solution is required, and also the entire climate. Hence, at this juncture, I would love to get both your thoughts around, I guess, the need of AI security. Do we need it? Is this the right time to develop it? If not, when will that be? And with that, I'll pass it on to Chris to get a little bit of your thoughts.
I think this is not even a whether or not question. I think it will come. And again, I think to Rod's earlier point, I think it just develops in parallel. And I think the technology is just very, very fast. And normally, obviously, policymakers take a bit of time to coordinate, to figure out a policy set that they can work with. And I think that's one of the news that we heard, that there were 16 companies now putting together an AI safety framework. And I think that's it doesn't surprise me. You see that the same kind of development with the internet. First came the technology, then everyone scrambles to regulate a certain technology. And I think this is no different here in this case. I suppose the bigger question here is really around almost like an ethical debate and consequences for humanity overall. What does it mean to have AI in terms of education? Think of high school. Like how do you deal with that technology? How are you going to integrate it? And also, how do you make sure that we don't? I think there are voices in the room that believe we get dumber by having AI because we don't have to do the hard work anymore, but we just get an answer instantly via ChatGPT or other players. And so I think those are some of the bigger questions that now policymakers will have to look at. And also, I think, to me, it's not an whether or not AI safety is a topic. I think it is. There's no question about it. I think the question is probably more around, okay, how do countries coordinate themselves? Do they collaborate? Do they not collaborate? But what do you think about it, Rod?
It goes to our discussion on, are we going to a mainframe era or everyone will have their own device? Where if it is really the case where there are a few gatekeepers, there is, let's say, OpenAI, there is also a Meta and so on. So, and we are all using their services in order to get our AI functionality. Then what they do or they do not do have massive consequences that trickle down throughout society. And at OpenAI, there has been a constant struggle on those who believe that we're moving too fast, that things are moving at a great speed, and even outside OpenAI. So I remember that last year and in previous years, so Elon Musk was saying, why don't we pause AI development for 6 months? Things are going way too fast. We don't know where we're headed. So maybe we should just stop any type of research for 6 months, just understand what's going on. And then after this, we can continue this in a much more controlled and measured manner. Of course, in practice, it's impossible to execute. But nevertheless, you can see that even among well-known personalities such as Elon Musk, but also within the OpenAI team, there is always this constant struggle between those who believe progress is good and progress in itself will lead to good outcomes, and those who say, actually, we don't yet fully understand everything that's going on. We need time to absorb this as a society and then understand the consequences of the technology. And to your point of what you were saying on this making us dumber, I also saw a recent study, and it's very interesting because it contradicts a little bit of previous studies. There was this one in 2022 from BCG that showed that consultants who use any type of AI to do a task, they get as good as those who are experts in that. So you take let's say, a average consultant who is a generalist, and then compare the person against an expert in a field, when both do not have access to AI tools, of course, the expert performs much better. But when you give the generalist access to an AI tool and the expert stays as it is, then the generalist can perform tasks on a similar level as the expert. But now what we saw from recent studies that are happening in academia, it is what you say. Students who rely on AI tools, they do not really learn, they do not really absorb the knowledge, and therefore they do not know what they're doing. They're just executing what the AI is telling them. So here is this question of, if we are moving too fast, one, and two, if we will depend from central institutions, then maybe these central institutions need to have some sort of guardrails, some sort of policies and so on, in order to control what is happening and what they are providing to the general common.
Just a quick one on the becoming dumber point. I think when it comes to being an expert, what is an expert? An expert is repeatedly doing something over and over again, and then he or she is known as expert because he or she has all the understanding of all the little nuances, nook and crannies in that field. I think with the OpenAI ability, or should I say, with AI's ability to kind of just improve a generalist's view on that, is interesting. But in order to get there, you need to have like a baseline ability to absorb information, to learn. Hence why the academic stuff is also quite interesting. I felt that both the knowledge are I guess in different spectrum, or I would say in different level of understanding stuff. But I would love to see how would that turn out in the future. And with that, maybe I should use less AI at the moment when understanding things.
Don't you guys think that probably there were three smart people, not on a podcast, but maybe in a cafe, talking about the exact thing when the computers came out of into the market? Like, how is this going to like disrupt education? And here we are, and I suppose all of us sat in lectures with a laptop, and we were perfectly fine learning the stuff we needed to learn or get quizzed on. So my fundamental hope, at least, would be that also with AI, there's a way around educating next generations on the knowledge that they need to know, or maybe even other soft skills, such as how to be a decent human being or how to do time management and all these different things that actually I don't think that AI has an answer or cannot give an answer. And I want to think that that's actually how also education can evolve with time.
Yes, absolutely. I see that throughout history, we always have this discussion of what is maybe too risky, what will change our society, maybe negatively, and so on. And we have yet to understand. We have yet to understand how it will be on the educational level. Nevertheless, in this case, with this AI Safety Summit that just happened this week, where you were saying, Chris, these 16 companies, they committed to adding guardrails and trying to offer some sort of safer AI is extremely relevant. And also just defining any type of rules, such as, for example, always having the right to a human, or knowing that you're talking to a non-human, and so on. Because for most people, so who are not in the technology, who are not following everything day to day, they do not really notice that in many cases with many chatbots, there is no longer a human who is behind. And also, for example, if they get rejected in their applications for, let's say, like credit, for education, etc., that it was not a human making the decision. So having access to, on one side, knowing this information, plus on top understanding why this happened, is essential in order to so have transparency, but also keep trust in society.
Great. I think with that, I guess from an AI safety perspective, we just have to see where the world is moving towards. I for one believe that humans ingenuity can bring us prosperity down the line. Developing guardrails, developing more technology for progress. I think we as humans will probably just make up fine. I have a lot more. I guess, confidence in that. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's Chris Rodmack Show. I hope you enjoyed that. With that, we love to hear from you if you have any thoughts around some of the topics that we talk about. And remember to smash that subscribe button. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.